Yeah. So what I would like to do today is to present a paper that I wrote recently, which is entitled "The Language of Neoliberalism in Education," and it basically discusses actually a new point of view about how to think about neoliberalism in education. So my presentation today is going to follow this this order. I would like to present the discussion of neoliberalism itself. Then, based on that, I would like to point out the conceptual inflation related to that. Then I would like to emphasize the transition between understanding of neoliberalism and neoliberalization. Then I would like to point out the different developmental stages of neoliberalism, which are, I've added a new one. Then this neoliberal shift, which somehow fits into the overall topic of the conference, and this is emancipation, and it's labeled progressive neoliberalism. So we need to understand another twist or shift related to neoliberalism. Then the sort of hostage crisis associated with them, the strategy of re-semanticization, then language, politics, and education, neoliberalism and education, the neoliberalization of education, and the actual rebranding of neoliberalism itself. What I would like to emphasize in this presentation is that actually there is this new phase of neoliberalism which actually tries to present itself as something which I claim it is not. So in the literature, there is now, throughout the social sciences and the humanities, there is actually now, neoliberalism is actually all over the place. So whether it is political philosophy, as you can see in the list of disciplines and areas of research, from political philosophy to education, security studies, feminism, anthropology, elder care, migration, critical sociology, geography and urban studies. So as one of the authors writing about neoliberalism emphasizes, neoliberalism has become a sort of a cottage industry. So it's been heavily discussed, and this is on the one hand very good, and you know, enables us to research this phenomenon. There is the dark side of this cottage industry phenomenon associated with neoliberalism is the conceptual inflation. So as Kim Birch points out, which is this quotation, is neoliberalism means many things to many people. And one other author writing, I think he's a geographer, if I'm correct, he accentuated neoliberalism has become something of a rascal concept, promiscuously pervasive yet inconsistently defined, empirically imprecise and frequently contested. And another author arguing that the notion of neoliberalism is neither intellectually precise nor politically useful. While it does help us to focus on this phenomenon, it is in a way misleading, and this is what we need in a way to point out and bear in mind when we discuss issues related to neoliberalism. Another important change in the discussion on neoliberalism has been that we move from understanding neoliberalism as a static phenomenon to neoliberalism as a process. So this phenomenon of neoliberalization is best characterized as a process of constant transformation, evolution, remodeling, adaptation, renewal, progression, and development. So instead of having a fixed object in terms of having it as relating to a static phenomenon, we need to understand neoliberalism as a process. And this brings us to the developmental stages. Two of them are very well known. So we have this first wave, neoliberalism, which has been associated with free market fundamentalism, evangelized by Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the US in the 70s and in the 80s. And the topics of the day have been privatization and deregulation. So this is phase one, or first wave. Then we have phase two. This would be the sort of Reagan Democrats, as they were called in the US back in the late 80s, beginning of the 90s. So with the advent of Bill Clinton's administration and Tony Blair's third wave in the UK, we have this second phase, which aimed to bridge the gap between social democracy on the one hand and the neoliberal rationality characterized by divination and faith in the market forces. So in a sort of blending the two, blending the social democracy with neoliberalism. So we have in the, let's say, politically speaking, the Democratic camp in the US, we have the introduction of the neoliberal vocabulary, speaking about responsibility, opportunity, and so on. So this is phase two, or second wave. And this second wave is a sort of a hybrid, as I said, of blending social democracy with neoliberal vocabulary, responsibility and accountability. So this is another quotation pointing to that. But what I think we are witnessing now is an important shift of emphasis. So we need to bear in mind that if we stick to this label of neoliberalism as a process, neoliberalization, we come to the third wave. And this is the third wave neoliberalism, which is not to be conflated with the third wave by Anthony Giddens in the 1990s and Tony Blair's cabinet. So we are witnessing this third wave neoliberalism, which in a way presents a departure from the first two, which have been marked and characterized by this strategy of marketization. So extension of the economic form of market into areas of the social where it was previously illegitimate. And there is a quotation from Wendy Brown's book, Undoing the Demos, Neoliberalism's Stealth Revolution. So this is a depiction of the first two phases of neoliberalism. What we are witnessing now is the third wave, and it is something very peculiar and specific about this particular developmental stage. And we have this neoliberal shift, which introduces which I think is important for our conference, is a turn to ideas broadly associated with an egalitarian ethos. Equality, justice, well-being, fairness, equality of opportunity. And this has been labeled by Fraser and Brenner as progressive neoliberalism. So if we look at various reports by major intergovernmental organizations like the World Bank or the World Economic Forum or the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, they are focusing on issues related to inequality. So this would, and justice and well-being and equality of opportunity. So instead of focusing on the strategy of marketization and the traditional rhetoric of deregulation and marketization and consumption and so on, we have this introduction of this neoliberal shift, which has a very specific change in the rhetoric being used. So we have actually, we have this, as I said, neoliberalism hostage crisis. So to an ill-informed or naive reader, this would be the sort of what we've been waiting for, that we've been waiting for neoliberalism to, or those advocating it, to see that it is not a sustainable ideology or a sustainable worldview or a sustainable program or even incoherent. So those of us, let's say, active in the area for some time, we are far less optimistic. As Nancy Fraser pointed out, is that different progressive projects, including feminism, got somehow hijacked by neoliberalism. As she wrote in a paper in The Guardian, I think it was published in, it's a movement that started out as a critique of capitalist exploitation, ended up contributing key ideas to its latest neoliberal phase. So this transformation, evolution, remodeling, adaptation, renewal, progression, and development has actually turned into its, at least on the surface, in its very opposite. So arguing for justice, arguing for equality, arguing for well-being, arguing for fairness. So the new neoliberalism rhetoric, neoliberalist rhetoric would be that. So the emancipatory and progressive rhetoric, which is traditionally associated broadly with the egalitarian point of view. So what we are witnessing at the same time is that by introducing this new rhetoric, we are actually witnessing this strategy of re-semantization, thesis-ization. And this is that the notions of, or concepts of justice and equality and well-being and fairness, they are being stripped of their historical legacy and emancipatory potential. So it is now a sort of, by being used by neoliberalism, they lose their traditional gravitational orbit of concepts. So we have here that that we are actually witnessing and living in first person, actually either singular or plural, this the evolution of neoliberalism. That and education is at the very center of this neoliberal transformation. So education has been at the very center of neoliberal's public policy agenda. And as it represents, as one of the documents of the OECD pointed out, one of the main indicators of future economic growth and individual well-being. This, what we are witnessing at the same time is that international large-scale assessment surveys became an important legitimacy lending tool associated with the process of governing by numbers, therefore establishing an intricate relationship between science, numbers, and politics. So this is a very complex phenomena, education being at the very center of it and marking this transition of the rhetoric of marketization to the progressive and emancipatory rhetoric associated with egalitarianism. So instead of, as you can see, instead of the standard neoliberal rhetoric of effectiveness, mobility, deregulation, privatization, efficiency, commodification, flexibility, entrepreneurship, consumerism, competitiveness, marketization, and so on, we have this new vocabulary of neoliberalism, which is fairness, which is justice, which is equality of opportunity, gender equality, well-being, and so on. So, and at the same time, we have the instrumental understanding of education, a distorted conception of fairness, adjunctification in higher education, anti-intellectualism, and a reductionist way of using quantitative data. So what I wanted to emphasize in my presentation was actually that we are witnessing a new neoliberalism, and not just pointing to neoliberalism as a process. This is neoliberalization, but an important shift of emphasis, which actually points out the rebranding of neoliberalism. So that by shifting the emphasis from the strategy of marketization to this allegedly progressive agenda of well-being, justice, opportunity, fairness, and so on, neoliberalism, both in the public and the academia, is aiming to rebrand itself. So, lastly, pointing out that we can label this as a neoliberalism with a human face. So as my 20 minutes of presentation are somehow going away, I would like to give you some additional information to that. So there is a book coming out in early 2021 entitled The Impacts of Neoliberalism, Discourse and Language in Education, which I'm editor of. And anyone interested in reading in full this presentation as a paper, you can Google it and look up for the rebranding of neoliberalism, which was published a few days ago in Educational Philosophy and Theory. So this is my presentation for now. Thank you.